How much experience do I need to DM? In my party, there is one experienced player, and we are all like 4 months in, and I kind of want to DM because I was curious and I thought it was a good idea. There's also this supervisor there because we play at our high school. I was going to ask the experienced player, and when I did, they were super against the idea, saying how it was too complicated and not workable. I want to DM, but the supervisor person also said it was too hard. I was curious to ask Reddit because I've seen people say you need 0 experience and people who say a lot, and I'm curious, how much raw experience do you actually need? This is a really interesting question that I've been asking myself throughout my game mastering career. In the past, I know I definitely would have sided with the 2 voices that this poster had previously spoken to, mostly because of my firsthand experience DMing and wanting new DMs to avoid being discouraged by falling on their face. But as I've gotten older, I've really lightened up on this and changed my perspective. And I get where some of these other posters on Reddit are coming from. They're excited to have other DMs that are excited to try out taking on the role. And the reality is you don't need encyclopedic rules knowledge or the best world building techniques to have a lot of fun at a table starting out. So yeah, in a way, you don't really need a lot of experience, but in another way, it does kind of help. Ultimately, I think even though this is a straightforward question, I think the answer depends on who you are as a person. Hi, I'm John. This is Dragon Mind, where we discover our best selves through gaming, and today we're asking the question, how much experience do you really need to start off as a GM for TTRPGs? Let's get into it. Okay, to start, I think it would be helpful to kind of relay some of my early experiences of DMing as some context for where we're going to go as we try to answer this question. I first gained an interest in TTRPGs during my senior year of high school 15 years ago. At the time, a local bookstore was going out of business, and the entire D&D 4th edition Essentials line was on clearance. On a whim, I bought the whole series for myself, read all of the books, but it was another 3 years before I even got the chance to try playing because it was difficult finding anybody else that was enthusiastic enough to try to play this obviously really complicated game. Of course, back then there weren't any actual plays to watch, and there weren't as many well-known TTRPG channels dedicated to helping new GMs get their feet underneath them. I didn't even know to look for those. The first game of D&D I ever played, I kind of felt forced to be the DM because, first of all, nobody else knew any of the rules, nobody had any of the books. They were only vaguely interested while I was actually enthusiastic enough to understand kind of how the game worked. But even then, I was far from being rules knowledgeable. For example, I built everybody's characters, and I forgot to add the proficiency bonus to everyone's attacks. So in the tutorial combat, which was against a pack of wolves, I'm sitting here like, man, these guys are missing a lot. And these wolves must have a really high armor class. And man, are they just trouncing these players. On top of that, I was just running the pre-written adventure included with the starter set. And there was no way for me to see that my now wife, who was one of those players, was like, I don't want to fight animals. So it ended up with this really weird conflict where the wolves were just trying to attack, but the players kept trying to calm them down. The whole thing was just a mess. And obviously, none of the players were on the same page about what this game was even about or what we even wanted out of it. I remember one player just giving up and deciding to just climb trees while he got attacked, falling and twisting his ankle. The whole thing was just an absolute mess. So yeah, as someone with 0 experience with TTRPGs, trying to DM players with 0 experience with TTRPGs, yeah, it ended up just being a really discouraging experience, and I didn't touch TTRPGs again for another 3 or 4 years. I didn't even really get an interest in DMing again until I had the chance to be a player in a seasoned veteran DM's campaign where I really got to experience what it was like to learn the rules one bit at a time. But even then, as a newer DM, I made a lot of really big mistakes that make my stomach churn just thinking back on them. Which kind of brings me to my main thesis about this question. To me, DMing is a lot less about what you do and a lot more about who you are. Even now, our culture's response to TTRPGs is completely different. Even when I was trying to run those 4th edition D&D games, TTRPGs were really nerdy and stigmatized, and a lot of people were embarrassed to even try them. After all, it is pretty much adults sitting around playing pretend. But now TTRPGs are not only a lot more accepted, there's a lot coming out about potential mental health benefits, and a lot of the mystique has been lifted because of actual plays like Critical Role or Dimension 20. Because of this, the internet is in no shortage of new DMing advice, including my channel here. There are endless videos on different character build, world building techniques, session 0 advice, safety tools. I could go on and on. And while all of those things can definitely elevate your game, they can't substitute for the unique perspective that you bring as your own person. For example, I remember a friend who started DMing around the same time that I did. This was after I had some experience under my belt and I kinda understood how the rules worked. Now, this friend was much more a TTRPG enthusiast than I was at the time. They were keeping up to date with all the hot new systems, the conversations surrounding TTRPGs, and really just went all in on the culture of TTRPG enthusiasts. However, when we both started running games, they were noticing that when players were talking excitedly about things they liked about TTRPGs, things that happened in my game were usually their examples. I wasn't trying storytelling techniques or anything. They were the ones that were really passionate about including a lot of advice they'd heard from channels like MCDM, WebDM, or XP to Level 3. And yet, their games were just missing some of that magic that mine tended to have. So one day we sat down and they just asked me straight up why I thought that might be. And to be honest, all I could really think of was my experience of, at the time, having been a few years in as a career martial arts instructor. I'd worked with kids as young as 3 and adults as old as 70. I'd just gotten really good at balancing my presentation where it was lighthearted with this underlying tone of discipline and adjusting my message to best fit whoever I was playing with. When I had discreetly asked some of the players that did play in both of our games, one of the common things that I was hearing was that I was really good at reading the table. While in the other DM's games, it kind of felt like the players were just playing out the DM's story. The DM was, unfortunately, for lack of a better term, railroading, while the DM was also incorporating techniques that could help them justify to themselves why they weren't railroading, but still, the players felt railroaded. And I guess that's my point. It's not the techniques that the DM tried to use, it's how they were presented and executed. To reference one of my favorite YouTube channels, Cinema Therapy, licensed therapist Jonathan Decker, when talking about Falcon and the Winter Soldier, said that a therapist is starting to kind of lose ground when instead of being able to connect to their client, they default to just using a bunch of therapeutic techniques to just see what sticks. And I guess that's the big difference of what was happening here. Rather than looking at DMing as a problem to solve with strategic techniques to move things along, I started more by connecting to my players, trying to pay attention to what emotionally activated them, and then shifting my style to make the most out of what they seemed to want. And there were some times I definitely got it wrong, but more often than not, it led to sessions that were fun and memorable. Again, I've come to believe that DMing is more about who you are than what you do. The clearer you are on who you are, the strengths that you bring to the table, your unique voice, and also what you want out of a game, the clearer that you can orient your players onto an experience that's going to be fun for everyone, including yourself. And also, over time, create a roster of players that's best just going to harmonize with you. It doesn't mean that you'll agree all the time or you'll always get things right, but more like if there's a player that wants to play a serious grim dark game, and you want to play just kind of generic medieval fantasy. The clearer you are about that, the less room they'll have to complain about how your game isn't satisfying what their expectations are. And because of that, I've just found that in general, communication, leadership, and teaching skills have proven far more invaluable in my time DMing than world building techniques or dramatic storytelling techniques. And of course, rules knowledge helps. It always feels good when you know the rule off the top of your head, or you're able to make a ruling really quickly and confidently. But you can also develop those things over time, which is where I wonder if this is part of where that question is coming from. How much rules knowledge do you need to go in? For that, you can go in with very little rules knowledge, but you will want to be upfront that you as the DM are learning the rules as you go. So the players may want to expect a little bit of inconsistency, or that individual things may take some time as you collectively look up the rules in the book, if that's even the direction that all of you want to go. But I found that if you're at least honest where you think you are from a skill perspective, you're more likely to have players that are going to not only forgive, but support you as you develop your DMing skills. When asked this question about DMing, Brennan Lee Mulligan of Dimension 20 fame, and now also of Critical Role fame, his advice is just start. There's never going to be a perfect time to give it a try. And no matter how experienced you are as a player, as a DM, you're still going to make plenty of mistakes. So this is where my little amendment to Brennan's statement comes in. You know you better than I know you. If you tend to really overthink things, and little mistakes tend to hurt you a lot more than others, then yeah, you probably want to hold off DMing for a little bit until you can set the stage to where you can be the most confident, to minimize the chances of making those kind of mistakes that are gonna hurt, while also recognizing, man, it's just gonna happen. If you're really excited though, and you know that you have players that are there to support you, and you don't mind falling on your face a little bit as you learn to get your feet under you, then sure, you might not need any experience and still run really fun, awesome games. Again, the biggest thing is, you just want to be mindful as you start that just like anything, DMing is a skill. And no matter how much experience you have as a player, there's probably going to be blind spots you have as a DM. After all, even if it's the same game with the same rules, it's a completely different role with its own set of responsibilities. And if you feel discouraged after your first time, there's probably some changes you can make to try to alleviate some of the pressure so you can have a better experience the next time. So yeah, how much raw experience do you need? The frustrating answer, but the true one is, I think it really depends on you. I will say, when you DM, you will bring a unique perspective and a unique life to your game that no other DM can. Will you be a Matt Mercer or a Brennan Lee Mulligan? No! But nobody else is going to be them. The reason that Matt Mercer and Brennan Lee Mulligan are such masterful game masters is because in a lot of ways, they've mastered their ability to be themselves in that role. So you don't need to be them. In fact, there have been games I've run where people say that was even better than games that they've seen them run. It's just that in those instances, what I happened to tap into was a part of myself that elevated the experience for everyone. So yeah, in some ways, you may even be a stronger DM than them, as long as you develop your own internal self. And you can't achieve mastery if you never start. By the way, if you do want some practical advice on getting started as a new GM, I have 2 videos on 7 baby steps to get you started. So now I want to hear what all of you have to say. If you're a DM, how much experience did you have before you started your journey? If you haven't tried DMing yet, why not? Are you just genuinely not interested? Do you think you need more experience before you try it out? Or is there something else that's holding you back? Oh, one last thing. In the description are playtest materials for the TTRPG I'm developing called Swiftguard. It's a 5e adjacent system with a streamlined action economy and customizable character creation that I've even been told might be a little easier to teach than D&D. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below or in the Swiftguard community Discord, also linked in the description. Have an awesome day, and remember, your story matters. Bye-bye now.